Welcome back to Insights into Northeast Michigan. Let's continue our conversation with Lora Greene.
Let's stick on the issue of water, and one of the biggest issues that has come throughout our district is PFAS contamination. I mean, we see reports on it almost every day now. Alcona is feeling the worst effects of this. And how would you evaluate the state's response to this emerging contaminant within our waters?
You know, we've done some good things. The testing that our state has started to determine what levels of contamination are throughout the state, and we've discovered there are a lot of levels. There are a lot of areas that are contaminated, including Alpena and Iosco. That's important because we need to know what areas are affected. But there has to be action after that. What are we going to do now that we know that there's contamination, and it's significant? We have at least 1.9 million people drinking contaminated water. That water is going through our sewer system and being applied to our agriculture, so it's in our agriculture system now as well. We have to come up with ways to remediate that situation, and we haven't. So Minnesota, for example, started action in 2006. They've been ahead of Michigan for some time on this issue. They have clean drinking water standards. They have already sued and settled with 3M for significant damages to start work on remediation. And we're just at the beginning phases of that. We haven't started a lawsuit. We haven't negotiated or obtained cooperation through the federal government yet to do real cleanup on the air bases and in the areas of Iosco that have been affected by that. And we need to take quicker action on that. It's time to actually move to the next level. I'm very concerned that we don't have clean drinking water standards. That has been in legislation, just sitting in committee for over 275 days, almost a year really. And there's no reason why it should be sitting there, tabled, hidden, and not discussed. We should be discussing it and coming up with standards that are going to be healthy for all of our citizens. We have people drinking contaminated water, and that needs to stop. We should be able to turn on our faucet and know that we're drinking clean water.
Another major issue on this year's ballot is the legalization of marijuana. Where do you stand on this issue?
Well, of course, whatever the voters decide, I'll support. Personally, I think that it has a lot of positive attributes to our state. There's always negative issues as well, and I understand some of our law enforcement's concerns. But overall, I feel that it will benefit our state in many ways. In addition to giving us more ability to work on the industrial side of what you can use marijuana for and the medical side of it. So, for the example, hemp is a biodegradable product, and we're limited on what we can use it for in the industry right now because of how it's deemed part of a marijuana class. So if we can legalize it, we can use that for our benefit and maybe create better industrial products that are actually biodegradable. I think that it will provide a better system for us to regulate the use and distribution of marijuana if it's legal, because we'll have better controls over it. We can actually obtain tax dollars from it. I think that time has showed us that we've kind of lost the war on enforcing and criminalizing marijuana, and a lot of people are being hurt. Young people who have made mistakes, who are have a record now, and it becomes more difficult for them to get a job. And so we're creating more barriers for people than helping them by criminalizing marijuana. And if we move forward with proper regulation and controls and use those funds to help with education on drug use and alcohol use, I think we would be better off as a state. And on that regard, there have been studies done that have shown that there has not been a significant change in use even after legalization. So I don't know that there's a need to have a huge scare over what will happen if it all of a sudden becomes legal.
What is one of the first issues you plan to address if you're elected into office?
Again, that goes to what I think my constituents want to see done. But right now, Line 5 has to be one of the biggest issues because it may, I don't know, it may be too late depending on what happens in November and December when they go back to session. But we really need to make sure we find a way to shut down Line 5 if we can, regardless of whether a tunnel is being built. I'd like to see that happen. And if it's too late to stop this contract from being entered into, at least create proper standards and controls over how this is going to happen. Right now, when I look at, and I've reviewed some of the contracts on that, the initial easement that was entered into, and then again the discussion on the tunnel and where they've been on that. And I just don't see proper timelines and controls. What are we going to do if in 1 year they haven't met the goals they're supposed to meet in 1 year or in 2 years? Or if they decide in 3 years that it's not feasible to build a tunnel, are we going to have an agreement that immediately then and there it stops Line 5 under the straits? There's just not, it's very vague. Again, I've talked about this before, how our legislators, our government sometimes intentionally creates vague laws and contracts, and we need to be more direct, we need to be more concise, and it needs to be clear what the rules are going to be and what happens if someone violates those rules. And I feel like we need to get that solidified before it's too late. And so that would be one of my first and primary goals when I get in.
Why should people give you their vote, and what makes you different from your opponent?
Well, I live here in Northeast Michigan. I feel like I have a good handle on what the issues are in Northeast Michigan. As an attorney and mediator for 28 years, I have learned a lot in representing individuals and businesses and what their issues and concerns would be in Lansing. One of the things as a mediator is I know how to cross lines. I know the importance of bringing people to compromise, and we've forgotten how to do that in Lansing. There's so much divisiveness right now, and we need to have balance in Lansing, and instead of just one particular group making all of the decisions. And I believe I can help with that in my skills as a mediator. You have to be open to discussions. You have to be open to understanding that there's more than one side to every story. There's usually more than two sides to every story. And creating solutions that bring the best of those opinions and goals from both sides to a compromised agreement that's actually workable. And if we can get back to doing that, we could actually get down to business in Lansing and actually get things done and follow through on our promises, because right now it's very difficult to do that because no one's willing to do it, and we have to start somewhere. I also feel that there's differences in how I approach issues. So I would not have voted down prevailing wage. I think that that's a very important aspect of keeping people employed with fair wages, and that's something that our current state representative voted down. I would not have sponsored a bill that would have created the opportunity for more invasive species to get into our Great Lakes, and that's something that our current representative did, and I think that we have to be conscientious and aware of our resources and protect them as best we can. I would not want to weaken our environmental standards, and I would have given us the opportunity on the ballot to vote for minimum wage and sick pay. I don't know what the outcome would have been, but people worked really hard to get that on the ballot, and at the last minute to remove that opportunity for us to decide, both voters to decide what they want, was wrong. And it was intentionally done to later change those rates and eliminate the opportunities of the minimum wage and sick pay requirements that were set forth in that ballot proposal. So I think those are some of the areas where I would be different than our current state representative. And I'm accessible. I'm accountable. I think that one of the things that in regard to one of your prior questions, what do people want and what are some of the issues we want? Accountability and transparency. Our state's one of the worst right now in being open and honest about what's happening in our government. And we need to change that. We need to have access to information. How do you know what to vote on or what the issues really are or the facts are if you can't get them? And you're paying your taxes, you should have access to us and you should have access to that information.
And that will do it for this week's edition of Insights into Northeast Michigan. The election is November 6th. Remember to get out there and vote.